Welcome back to the second part of our logo reveal tutorial. In the previous session, we put together this animation of our client's logo revealing over time. We've done that with the use of some Illustrator assets that we prepared, and also the transformation keyframing of properties over time. Let's add a few final touches to this animation. One of the things that we want to do, or that I want to introduce, is the concept of pre-composing. And pre-composing is the nesting of animations inside of other animations, and that process can kind of loop indefinitely, allowing you to create some very complicated kind of animation structures. Anyway, let's go ahead and look at how we do it and what it can achieve for us. So what I want to do is I want to add all of this animation inside of another animation. So firstly, let's add a little bit more complexity, or another element at least, to the animation. And I'm going to do that by adding some video from a stock video website. And we've most likely used Pexels before. Pexels, along with still video, still photography, also does video. Here we go, that's what I'm looking for, Pexels/videos, and we get a similar kind of interface where we can search for stock videos. Search for nature, and you can see I've got a lot of different options. I'm just going to grab the first nature, pick that nature video that I find. It's going to be downloaded. Obviously, you want to credit the original makers of the video that you use in any of your productions, but all of this video is free to use. So I've got that video in my downloads folder. I want to put it onto the desktop with the rest of my, so I've got my reveal animation assets there. And it reminds me that I haven't even saved this. I haven't saved this After Effects project. I'll just call it reveal. So After Effects does import and process lots of different file formats, lots of different multimedia formats, different kinds of sound files, including WAV and AIF files, MP3 files, lots of different image files, all of the screen file formats that we use, like JPEG, PNG, and GIF, etc. Also, native file formats. Obviously, we've looked at PSD files and AI files, and also a lot of different video files, QuickTime files, MP4 files, AVI files. And we're going to import that MP4 that we downloaded from Pexels. And when we include a video into our animation, it operates just like a layer from our Photoshop or Illustrator files that we've imported. Now I can drag that element, I can drag it into my animation there, and I should be able to see it turn up in the background. Excellent. So you can see when I move my timeline indicator, though, that the the video does have a sequence of images that it is playing in the background there. So as I scrub through, we can kind of see the video play. Video is definitely a lot more kind of processor intensive. So you might find if you've got a slower, older Mac, that your machine might struggle a little bit with video. One thing that you can do is drop down the preview quality, and that will help your computer's performance. But you can't get around the fact really that video is a much heavier file format, and yeah, it's going to take time to process it on the timeline. It's also going to take more time to render it, so we have to factor that in. If your machines are slower and older, you might want to keep minimum video to a minimum. Anyway, we can see that video in the background there. I'm just going to zoom out a little bit, Command and minus, just like Photoshop in Illustrator. We can see the bounding box of that video. It's quite a lot higher res than 1200 by 1200 HD or larger. And I'm going to twirl down the video's transformation properties. So I'm going to twirl down the scale property, and you can see that I can change and modify the scale of a video just like I can any of the graphic kind of layers that I've brought in from Illustrator or Photoshop. So I'm just going to bring that down and twirl down the position property as well. And I can change the position of that element too on the canvas. All right, excellent. So here is where I want to bring in the pre-composition. This is where I want to bring in the pre-composition, that I talked about before. I'm going to nest one animation inside another animation, and I'm going to do that from my main animation timeline. I'm going to create what they call a pre-composition, and I'm going to include a bunch of the layers from my main animation inside that. So my logo reveal is what I'm going to pre-compose. So I've selected all 6 of those layers. And I'm going to go up to Layer and Pre-compose. I can also right-click on those layers, and there's my pre-composition option. I'll open that up. Pre-compose dialog box, and I'm going to move all the attributes into a new composition. And I'm going to click OK. And you'll see that it will collapse all of those layers down into an animation, a composition, that's included inside my main animation. I'm just going to undo that for a sec. Command 0 and go back to Layer, Pre-compose, because I've neglected to rename it here. So I'm going to call this nested composition my logo reveal. Okay. All right, so that's more like what I wanted to achieve. I can got a properly named animation there, and it is a layer inside my main animation. Up over here in my assets window, I can see that I've created a new composition. I've got my main animation composition that we were been working in all the time, and now I've created this new logo reveal animation, and this one is in fact inside this one. We can see that over here. So we're in our main animation, and our logo reveal is inside there. And I can go back into the logo reveal and work on all of those elements and animation adjustments that I had made before. I can update that, and it will update that inside my main animation. It's kind of like a group inside of Photoshop, or maybe a smart object, something like that. But yes, it's assets and animation nested inside of other animations. And so why that is useful is now I can actually manipulate the transformation properties of that animation itself. So over time, I'm going to change the scale of my animation. So as our 10-second animation plays out, I'm going to, here, I'm going to adjust the scale so you can see over the whole animation of that whole timeline. Our reveal animation is getting larger and moving towards the camera. So we can animate those nested compositions as well in the same way that we could animate any kind of asset or media that we include in our compositions. Okay, one final thing that I want to add to our logo reveal, and that's just an overlay, a color overlay over the top of our video, and that'll allow me to show you how to add another kind of layer into our stack there, and that is a layer new solid. Okay, and I suppose this is kind of like a solid fill layer in Photoshop, but I can create a solid that is the same size as my document, and I can pick a color, and thankfully the color that I wanted to choose is already loaded in there, but it could be any kind of color that I want, and that is editable. And I click OK, and we can see that that solid is loaded up into my animation. And I want to change the name of it in the timeline here. We'll see that I've created a new folder here for solids, and I've got the medium lime green solid. But in my timeline, I want to change it to something, to another name that I can remember. And I can do that by hitting return on the keyboard, and I might change that just to make that a little bit easier for me to remember. I'm going to change the transformation property of opacity. Just drop that down a little bit. So I've got that green tint over the top of that video. And so that's our video completed, and I'm going to hit the spacebar and just play that through, and you guys will notice that it's not playing at the actual speed. This is not 1:1 in seconds. What the computer is doing is rendering, processing this animation into its cache. It's kind of going to go and remember all those calculations so that when it runs through the preview a second time, it'll play it at actual speed. And you can see that that little green line along here indicates what's actually been processed and in cache. Just at about this point, we'll loop back and it'll play it at its actual speed. Yeah, so to get a good understanding of how your animation is actually operating, you'll need to make sure that that preview has been rendered into cache. So that's our final animation completed. The only thing left to do now is to export that out to an MP4, either to upload to the platform that we're using, and been making something for Instagram here, or email delivered to our clients. So we'll want to go File, Export, and add to the Adobe Media Encoder queue. And it will take a second for Adobe Media to load up. It's my Adobe Media Encoder queue. We're going to output to a MP4 that is encoded with H.264 compression. I'll just give this a new name. Reveal. And I'm going to change just the bit rate under the video session here. Now, just select the video tab under my export settings and just come down and drop the target bitrate down to something a bit lower. You can see, well, you will see that we'll have a nice small file size to contend with, and I'll click OK and click the Start Queue button and we'll render that out. And you can see it's going to take a little bit longer than our previous exports, which were just graphics from Photoshop. You can see that it's causing my computer to run a little, the video that I've included is causing my computer to run a little slower or struggle a little bit harder with the that render. And you can imagine if I had multiple videos and a much longer animation, that we might be waiting quite a long time.